Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our live session today. My name is Larissa. I'm an event planner at Reactor, joining you from Brazil. Before we start, I have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. The session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand here on the Reactor YouTube channel within 48 hours. Keep an eye on the chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenter to answer. I will now turn it over to our speaker for today. Thank you all for joining us today, and let's welcome Jochen.
Hi there, and welcome to session number 9 of our series. I hope that we've got some folks that have been on all the sessions so far, but it really doesn't matter. Some of these sessions, you might not even use it for the exam for that matter, but some of these sessions might be useful either way. Today we're going to look at something interesting. I probably always say that, but it's definitely two topics that I think is really relevant with us building applications in the current sort of environment and with the way things are currently and how we add value with things like AI and things like this. Event-based solutions is always going to be that scenario where, hey, I want to maybe do a little bit of pub-sub scenarios. I've got big data that I need to aggregate, and interacting with those types of events. So what I had on our agenda today, welcome again. My name is Jan Meiberg. I am a technical trainer with Microsoft here in the UK, and today we're going to explore the Event Grid and the Event Hub in Azure as part of the Azure Developer Certification. We're first going to talk about what are events and what type of events are we referring to, right? An event is not just an event, right? And then we will go in a little bit more detail on the Event Grid, right? And then we'll talk in a little bit more detail around the Event Hub, and then there's a conclusion that we'll just wrap up, and I'll tell you what to go and focus on as far as the exam is concerned. I can tell you, though, that if you go look at the online material for this, that there really is a couple of areas that I cannot cover in an hour's worth of time, all right? I'll give you a quick example of this. If I go search for the 204, there you can see there's the course, and if I expand the content and material at the bottom, you can see that there's develop event-based solutions. It's official part of the curriculum, but you'll notice if you go look at, for example, explore the event grid, discover event schemas, look at event durability, right? There's a retry schedule. There's some information. I cannot go to this level of detail in an hour's time. So it's up to you folks to go and read up on a retry policy. What's the maximum number of attempts? What are these values? They would love to catch you out in the exam asking questions like this. What happens if I cannot respond to the event grid, right? Well, it's got a retry policy, as you can see there, output batching, all of these things. We don't have enough time to go through this, but it's important for you to understand the concepts around this. And to this end, I've got a very special use case that I even use in all my courses. And the use case is about a refrigerated truck scenario, right? So I'll explain this quite nicely. Suffice to say, if we're looking at the agenda, I want you to realize two things. The event grid is more or less a fan out type pattern. So something happens and multiple services and resources might want to be made aware of that. And this is also why you'll see the event grid has got that in its actual icon, right? If I go back to the previous page here, oops, daisies, that was way, not the wrong one. Give me a moment, sorry. If you look at the icon, this is the event grid, right? And you can see from the event grid that something starts and it fans out towards multiple scenarios. I want you to think of the event hub. The word hub is a dead giveaway here. The event hub is more of a fan-in type pattern. In other words, multiple devices sending messages all to one centralized, in this case, event hub. Right? So you can actually differentiate and see the differences by just looking at the icons in that sense. That said, they're not going to ask you questions about the icons in the exam, right? So it's important that you understand the terms as well. Now, when I say events, I want you to realize that there are different types of events. And let's use a practical example that's completely outside of IT, for example. If I'm an event planner, right, and someone asked me to organize, for those of you that understand what this is in Afrikaans, a braai, right? A braai is like a type of a barbecue kind of thing. It's just better. And then if you look at something like a wedding, right? The way you're going to approach a braai / barbecue, it's not really the same thing, right? We end up sitting next to the fire after the braai. It's not just like a cooking station. So at a braai, we're going to either say this was a good braai or this was a bad braai, right? It's one single thing. You bring your meat, we pack the meat on the braai, we braai the meat, and it's very, very simple. Hey, that was a good braai. Oh, it was a bad braai because we dropped the meat inside the fire, or whatever the case might be, right? Or Joe fell in the pool or something like that. So the criteria for a braai and a barbecue is actually very, very simple. We must just enjoy ourselves. I want you to, and this is an example of a very simple event, right? As long as we get the meat cooked, we're actually quite content. We're going to be having the meat, probably even if the meat is not well cooked. This is a very simple event. One thing happens and we're going, all right, we're going to judge the result of that based on that single event. I want you to think of a wedding. A wedding, there's not one single thing that makes the wedding a success. There's going to have to be a couple of things, right? So in a wedding, there's probably a bride. I'm not sure if all men think like this all the time, but if I'm probably thinking that a bride is probably going to want to say, hey, I want the wedding cake to be spot on and perfect, right? I want a wedding cake that's got the photo of my face right at the top. I can also say that the flowers is a big deal, right? And then, I'm running out of ideas already. You can only see I've done one wedding in my life, and yeah. So what makes up the success of a wedding is not one individual thing. It's probably a combination of a couple of things. And it might be that goes well, but this does not go so well, right? Maybe this is when we're at the altar reading our rights, or whatever it was that wasn't going well. And then even if there's one or two things that didn't go well, the overall wedding can still be a success, right? So I want you to understand that with simple event management, there's typically one single thing that happens, one message that arrives, one piece of telemetry that arrives, one piece of information that gets put onto the system, and things respond to that, right? From complex event management, it might not be an individual thing that determines whether this was a good event or not, right? It might be a combination of a couple of things. So the use case and the scenario that I've got for this that I think works quite well is the scenario of a butcher. So a meat packaging butcher company, and this company has got customers all over the city, right? Loads of customers. And of course, what we do, because we deliver, right? This is Contoso meat. We've got all these customers. And because we deliver, we don't outsource our delivery. we've got a couple of delivery trucks, right? And each of these depots, this is depot A, depot B, depot C. Each of these depots has got at least, one or more truck. Let's make this a massive truck with a bunch of wheels. I've got a couple of trucks, and these trucks basically are going to be driving around delivering the meat. All right, let's see how much of that comes with. Here we go. All right, my truck is falling apart a little bit. Okay, so there's my truck, and I'm going to just paste a few of these trucks. It's also not what I wanted. Each of these depots have got a couple of these trucks, right? 2 trucks at least. One truck over there. It knew that I wanted to put the truck down that side. So there's a couple of these trucks. Trucks have seen some better days. Okay, now I want you to keep something in mind. These are special trucks because they've got a little IoT device, a little sensor there on the truck. And what this does is the minute the truck starts up, this sensor connects to the internet, and then we want to build a type of dashboard, right, that shows me all the different trucks. This is truck A, truck B, truck C, D, E, and of course truck F. And I can say that truck A, truck B, truck C, D, E, and F. I've got these 6 trucks. And what we want is in the first column, we want to show whether the truck is actually going or not. So the minute these trucks all start up, this little sensor here is going to connect to our IoT system, and it's going to start transmitting data. We've got some sort of an IoT system somewhere that that has got a bit of a halo going, and these trucks start transmitting to my system. That means that when the truck starts up, the truck might be red overnight, and all of them might be red, right? These trucks are not going right now. They're standing still in the depots. And in the morning, as these trucks start firing up, they're packed full of meat now. And as this starts happening, the dashboard starts lighting up. You can see, truck A and truck C are now up and running. They're out driving. And I want to know and this is a type of Boolean state, when the truck is connected or when the truck is disconnected, for that matter. Can you see that this is a type of a Boolean state, right? This is a type of Boolean state that I've got going here. So whenever this IoT device connects to my IoT system, this is my IoT system. Whenever it connects to my IoT, it looks like a person, but this is my IoT system. Whenever this truck starts up, the refrigerator boots up in the back, it starts pumping cool air through, and that IoT device connects to this IoT hub. And actually, at that point in time, whenever that IoT device connects, we want our application to know, hey, another truck has connected, and we can now show this as green in our dashboard, for example. All right, so now the truck starts driving. I'm going to do another paste there. The truck starts driving, and the truck is now, this truck lost a wheel there. The truck is driving from customer to customer, covering its area. Happy days. At this point in time, we were hoping that the meat in the back of the truck is actually kept cool. right? So what this application of ours does also is this application is going to aggregate and look at the temperature inside the truck, right? So I'm going to make this blue. So inside the back of the truck, in this big refrigerator, this IoT device of mine it connects up, and then it starts sending the temperature, right? Every 1 minute, I get a temperature reading. Every couple of minutes. And this is true for all the trucks, right? We get this telemetry, and what we've figured out already now, based on the route that our truck takes inside of inside the city, what we've figured out is if this temperature inside the truck goes over 5 degrees for longer than 10 minutes, there's a really, really good chance that the meat is going to go off inside that truck. Now, I want you to see the difference here. With the one, the truck is either connected or disconnected, right? That's like the braai or the barbecue. It's either on or off. It was either a good braai or it was a bad braai, right? No such thing as a bad braai, really. But look at the other metric that I've got here, folks. This is not a Boolean state. What this might require is for me to run queries over this data and check to see, hey, in the last 10 minutes, what was the temperature in the truck? And if it went over 5 degrees for 10 minutes, the combination of these couple of events might lead us to believe, whoopsie, there's something wrong. So maybe the dashboard lights up. Maybe the dashboard starts giving us a big, red line around the truck saying, ooh, this truck is actually, it looks like the temperature inside this truck is getting too high. It's been like this for 9 minutes now. And eventually you're going to start getting an alert. And this thing is now going to be flashing amber, right? So it starts flashing amber, and we've got a person monitoring the scenario, and they can now call the truck and say, it looks like there's an issue with your refrigerator. Head back to the closest depot. So, folks, I want you to think of this scenario. It's a pretty hectic drawing. I'm quite well aware of that, right? But I want you to think of these two scenarios. The one is something happens, and I want to respond to that, or I need to know about that, or I want to programmatically do something about that. The other type of event is more a streaming data type scenario where we've got complex event management, right? Possibly those devices send a message every 4 seconds, not milliseconds. Every 4 seconds they send, or 10 seconds or whatever, they send a message. So we're talking really here about a big data aggregation story as opposed to just something has happened in a pub subtype scenario. Now, I want to make it clear that if you wanted this sort of information where you want to know when something connects and when something disconnects, right? Or you want to know when a blob was added on a storage account. You want to know when a blob was deleted on a storage account. You want to just react, or multiple systems just need to react to one thing happening. This is going to be the work of the event grid. The event grid will look at what's happened, and it will notify everything that needs to know about it using a type of subscription. Right? So the event grid is used for those once-off incidents. Something has happened and I want to respond to that. The event hub, on the other hand, this one here, let's choose a different color pen. The event hub, on the other hand, is more for that type of scenario, because the event hub gives me essentially a Kafka cluster, and I can go and have multiple readers read information and query that information and replay that data over and over and over and over again. All right, so let's take a look at some of my slides here. I want to make it clear the event grid, as you can see here, you can see the event grid does that. Even the icon shows you it's doing a fan out type scenario. You can see there, right? So with the event grid, every single event is meaningful. And I'll give you an example of this. One of the examples is a blob was added. A blob was added onto our storage account. Now, if you think of thousands of temperature messages coming in and me analyzing those messages and one of those messages not being there, it's not going to skew my results as much. But if I've got a blob that was added and I need to respond to the blob that was added and check for things like obscenities, resize it, watermark the blob or something like that, if I miss that event, someone might see a very sketchy picture, or we might, have some sort of an issue from that. But essentially, with the event grid, we want to respond to something happening. And there is an event source. Then there's the event that happens from that source, and that event generally gets sent to a topic, and the topic has got a subscription, and the subscription essentially has an application or service that is going to be informed of that happening. Right. I didn't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick example of this. So what I've got is I've got a Jazz 204 container. So I've got a website here called the Azure Event Grid Viewer. I'm going to roll through a few demos with you quickly. This is the first one, right? Event grid. Single event is meaningful. Something happens, something responds to that. All right. This event grid viewer is something that is available. If you go to our hands-on labs, you'll see this is something that you'll do in one of our labs for the 204 certification. And if I go in here, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to go to my storage account. I've got a storage account called Jazz 204 Storage. In there, I'm going to create an event subscription. Hello, I've already got a event subscription there. I'll add another one. I just won't save it. I can say there, Blob has been added. All right, I'm running out of ideas here. I do want you to focus on this a little bit. You might get questions in the exam on the event schema. The event grid schema is a proprietary Microsoft schema. We also have something called the cloud event schema, which is a little bit more standards-based and will eventually allow for us to be sharing and publishing events from, or aggregating events from that matter, from third parties and other cloud providers. So there's a cloud event schema. And to be honest with you, if you look at the course code, right, if you look at the course information, I'm just going to scroll down here just briefly. You will see there's event-based solutions. If I look at the course material, there's event schemas. You can see there's the event schema, all of the properties for that. Cloud event schema, right? So I guess the point is, excuse me, I guess the point is I cannot go to this level of detail in a 1-hour session. So please, folks, don't think that this is all we're going to be covering as far as the exam is concerned. I just want to clear my throat quickly. You will have to go and dig a little bit deeper and get your head around some of these topics, and I've got them summarized quite nicely in the slide. You can also see, because this is a storage account, you can see that that these are all the events that are available from a storage account. Now, if I went to my IoT hub, I'll have options like device connected, device disconnected, things like that. Every service in Azure that is event grid capable has got a system topic, right? So that's basically what I'm creating here. You can see I'm creating a topic, and this is known as a system topic. I'm not sure if this is going to lead exactly where I wanted to lead to, but you can see there's an overview of all the system topics that we've got currently. IoT Hub, Key Vault, Azure Policy, Service Bus, Signal R, Storage Actions, Azure Subscriptions, right? Each of these have got some integration into the event grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select Blob created and Blob deleted for that matter. And in this case, what I'm going to do is you can see that as far as the endpoint and the event handler is concerned, oopsie, you can see that we can inform an Azure function. We can send the information to an event grid namespace topic. It's like a meta topic, if you like. Event Hub, we'll talk about that next. Hybrid, partner destinations, service bus topics and queues. I do want you to notice that all of these are in fact Azure services. And to this end, I will not have to validate my event subscription to those services because they live in Azure, all right? However, if I choose a webhook, with a webhook, there's going to be a very special handwriting, interesting. With a webhook, there's going to be an interesting handshake that happens, API/updates, and we do a special handshake with webhooks just to prove that webhook knows what to do with these type of requests and that you in fact own that webhook in that context. So what's going to happen here, don't worry about all these blob created options. Sorry, but that will drive me slightly crazy. I just want to go and disable those just quickly. It'll just take a few seconds. I think it's never on. That's the... No, it's not never on. Might be this one. Events. I'm going to delete that. And that should make that stop at least. Here we go. All right. So I've pointed it to that webhook. Take a look what comes through on the event grid viewer here now. Confirm the selection. I click on the create button. There's the handshake. It's going to come through. Subscription validation event. You can see it sent a handshake. This event grid viewer responded and says, yes, I know what to do with this information. And off we go. Now I can go over to my storage account and I can head to my storage browser. And you'll notice as far as my blob containers are concerned, if I go to my statements here and hit the upload button, you can see that I can then drag a couple of items in there. There we go, that one, that one, that one. Hit the open button, click on upload, and you'll see blob created, blob created, blob created. These are the individual blobs that were created, statements, etc. So what are we doing here? We are creating essentially a system topic, and a system topic represents services that we are familiar with in Azure. There you can see there's all the system topics. However, we've also got custom topics, right? And I want to show this to you quickly as well. I've got about 30 minutes left here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the event grid here quickly. There you can see there's an event grid. There's a custom topic. You can see I created one called custom topic. It's really just a question of specifying network security. There's some advanced options. There's more advanced options if you're using the command line options. We've got things like a dead letter queue and things like that. But if I go to my custom topic here, then you will see I've hooked up this custom topic also with this event grid viewer, but I've actually got an application that I can use. So I'm just going to go File, Open Recent. There's my event grid scenario. And you can see here that what I've done, there's my event grid publisher. I've given it that connection string essentially. That's the my topic endpoint. There's the key for that scenario. Let me just show you where that is. You can see under access keys, you can see there's key 1, key 2. It's basically that key over there, D28, right? So all I've done is I've created a custom topic, and when I go to my overview, you can see the custom topic gives me a topic endpoint. And if I have the topic endpoint, then you can see I can go to access keys and I can just use the key. And this will give me the ability to actually interact with and publish events to that custom events, for that matter, to that event grid. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a .NET run. And in this instance, you'll notice what it's going to do is it's going to pop 2 custom messages on there. There you can see the subject, the event type. I've specified a custom event type, employees.registration.new. I'm registering a new employee here. So a new employee was added. Now we need to notify all our different services. Someone needs to organize a laptop. Someone needs to organize a card. Someone needs to get a picture taken, things like this, right? Fan out type scenarios. And already at this point in time, you'll see that I've got 2 events published. If I head back to my event grid viewer, there you can see there's my event type, employee registration. And if I zoom in there, you can see under the data section, there's my payload, right? In this case, the payload looks like the payload, full name, address. Typically what we'll do is we will create the user somewhere on a system and just put the user identifier onto the event grid, so that I can now use that user identifier and connect to the system and find that user and make, update the user or whatever the case might be. Okay, so this is a relatively nifty way, and you'll see, I've got some other blobs that get dropped in there every few seconds. That's why it's actually doing that. Okay, so the event grid, a single event is meaningful. Something happens, I want to respond to that. Very much a pub sub type pattern. It doesn't store the data as much as it retries to deliver this data, right? So go look at that information on the Learn material. Some scenarios around this. You can see a new purchase order in your custom application. That'll typically be a custom topic. A new blob in the Azure storage account. This is typically a system topic because Azure storage sits inside of Azure. An IoT device connects or disconnects. And you can see just an example of that. If I go for my IoT hub here, you'll notice my IoT hub under events, has got exactly that. Device connected, device disconnected, all right? So it's also quite easy for me to show some of that. If I, go to by some in here, then you should see I can hit the run button, and within a few seconds, it's going to come up here and it's going to start saying device connected, and it'll show that that device is actually connected. It'll come through any second. I'm not going to wait for it to come through now, but you'll see if I hit the stop button and stop and start again, eventually it's going to come back and it's going to say device connected, device disconnected. All right, it's not immediate, but it will eventually deliver this message. All right, that's the event grid. And just from an analogy perspective, I want you to think of the event grid as something that covers all your resources. And when something happens on one of those resources, the event grid fires and lets other systems know that that has in fact happened. Okay, contrast this with the event hub. The event hub is a completely different beast. The event hub allows me to store data And you can almost see this as a type of buffer, right? So what we do is we create an event hub. The event hub has actually got different partitions. I'm not going to get into the detail now, but you can either read or write directly to and from the hub, or you can read or write directly to and from one of these partitions, but that's essentially where we get some of our scale from. And I'm going to remove those because I'm just going to show you here that I might have multiple devices, and all of these devices are going to basically be sending the information into this event hub. They might be something like IoT devices, because our event hub even caters for protocols that allows these devices to stay connected. So we're talking here about a big data streaming platform, as opposed to just something happens and we want to look into this information. Now what this, we've also got the concept of, well, let me create one of these quickly and I'll show you what I mean by this, or just show you one of them. I actually created one a little bit earlier. Covered this yesterday on one of my training sessions. There we go. I've got a Jazz 204 hub. You can see the hub is effectively a namespace. And by the way, a namespace in this context will be the equivalent of a Kafka cluster. And inside the namespace, we then go and create an event hub. And an event hub is the same as a Kafka topic. All right. You can see I created an event hub called sales orders. And you can see I've got a couple of options. There's some connect options, and you can see I can add some shared access policies that'll give me a connection string to authenticate. But you can also see we've got the concept here of consumer groups. What this basically implies is there's always a default consumer group, and the default consumer group is going to have full access to the data inside the event hub. But what I can do is I can decide, or let me rather put the arrow that way, I can decide I've got another service that I also want to read this data. So I can create a consumer group for the sales application. And that sales application will now have access to its own copy of this data. Same there if I wanted to hand this off to our operations team, right? The operations application also wants to read this information. I can go and create one of these consumer groups for every service that needs a copy of this. Okay, and by the way, you should notice that, not from that perspective, but you should see, I think it's under configuration overview. You can see that there's the standard pricing tier, and I can choose different pricing tiers. There's a dedicated, premium, and basic. And based on the pricing tier, you can see the maximum days of retention. You can see for the basic tier, it's only 1 day. For the standard tier, 7 days. Premium tier, we're going to allow you to have this data inside there for 90 days. And that means that your data is essentially going to aggregate inside the event hub, and you might now go and run some windowed queries over that data. What I mean by windowed queries is if I go Azure window queries, stream analytics, there you can see there's some windowing functions. And what I'll typically do is I'll link a stream analytics service up with my IoT hub or with my event hub for that matter. And then I'll be able to run queries like this. Show me the items where, tell me the count of tweets per time zone every 10 seconds. There you can see this is known as a tumbling window. right? There's a couple of them. There's also a hopping window, right? And you can see with hopping window, it's kind of overlapping, right? There you can see a session window where what we're basically saying is tell me the count of tweets that occur within 5 minutes to one another. So the window here might be completely different. And there's a couple of them. There's a sliding window component. There's a snapshot window. There's tumbling windows, right? And all sorts of queries that you can run over this data. And that's why I keep saying with the event hub, the pattern might not be a single event. Each of these tweets was an event. With the event hub, I can now go and run queries over this data and say, for example, show me all the virtual machines in this region that were rebooted within 24 hours, twice, for example. That's the kind of information we can get from that service. All right, so what I'm planning to do here is I'm also going to show you a quick demo of this. I'm going to point you to something quickly. You will see we've got the concept. There's my sales orders, and this is something I didn't mention earlier. We've got the concept of a capture here. So I want you to think, if you're familiar with something like lambda patterns, right? Where I might have my big data streaming here, and after 7 days, my data drops off the event hub, right? If I haven't processed anything after 7 days for the standard tier, that data is gone. So what do we do if we want to keep this data and do some long-term analysis over this data? What we can do is, you can see exactly there, it's referred to as capturing. It's also part of the course information, by the way. What we can do is we can configure a capture, and we can use the capture component to send the information to a storage account, right? And that means my data and my logs and all these messages will now start aggregating in a storage account where I can do some long-term analysis. And that allows me to bring, so this becomes more like a cold store, and this becomes something like a hot store that I can actually query some of that information on. Right. Something weird on my pants here. All right. So I do hope that makes sense. Event hub, the pattern is usually in multiple events. We're catering here for stream data, and we're talking here about storing events, telemetry data, temperatures, and things like that. And whereas the result of the event grid is usually some sort of an action, right? The result of the event hub might be me understanding that, hey, in that information there is actually critical for us, and we can then respond to those scenarios. So we're generally talking about a type of fan-in pattern here, and you can see if I'm, for example, taking my Azure alerts and I'm pushing all this information into an event hub, those are the types of queries that I can be running, right? What is the temperature? Show me the trucks where the temperature was over 30 degrees for longer than 10 minutes. That means the meat's probably already cooked. Show me the manufacturer where devices fail more than twice a week, for example, in my event hub. How many purchase orders have we had today, right? Those sort of queries. And then just in conclusion, before we get to some questions and answers, I can tell you folks, without any doubt, you're going to have to go and do a little bit more digging as far as this is concerned. If you look at the course around this, and I scroll down to event-based solutions, take a look at event durability. Look at all these options, the retry policy. I can ask you a wide variety of options around this. Output batching, we can batch outputs, right? Max events per batch, preferred batch size in kilobytes, delayed delivery, Dead letter events, right? We don't have time to go through all of these and look at all these nuances. So please take some time, go through the learn material, go do the labs. There are some good labs around this. And just in conclusion, we spoke about simple as well as complex events. We spoke about pub/sub, a little bit on the event grid side, but some of the key concepts that you need to master for the exam is make sure on the event grid you understand the use cases around that. Make sure you understand the durability of these event grid notifications. Make sure you understand and have at least looked at the different schemas for the event grid as well, and understand what level of access you need in order to create an event subscription on one of your Azure resources. And then lastly, from the hub perspective, make sure you understand the concept of partitions. Make sure you understand the capture component quite nicely. And just to show that capture component to you, you can see there's the capture. And I can go and specify either a time period or a size in megabytes of when we are going to take a snapshot of what is new and push it out into that storage account where I can go and do some long-term analysis around that information. So also understand the concept of publisher/processor on the event hub. They might ask some questions around that. And I would say if you've done the labs around both these learning paths, that you're in a really, really good space. And that was a very high-level introduction into these two services, enough for you to grasp the concepts, hopefully, but also enough for you to go and do a little bit more digging and dig a little bit deeper in those various areas. Let's see if we have any questions, and I'm sure there'll be at least one or two questions, and then we will close off.
We didn't receive any questions, so if you want to give it a minute and see if any questions pop up here in the chat.
Okay, cool. I'll probably look a little bit disappointed here. But maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. Maybe I've driven the concept home really nicely. If not, if there aren't any questions, I implore you to go dig a little bit deeper, at least from exam. How could we combine both services? I think that like this, right? You can see in this case, if I want to know when one of those IoT devices is connected, I can create an application, and I can expose an endpoint, a web endpoint there that the event grid can send us messages to. Device connected, device disconnected. And then I can check what the device was, and I can light it up on my dashboard. And then further to this, we might be running some queries here in the background that allows us to see if the temperature of the refrigerator is going over that amount, right? So this one is a use case for the event hub. This is a use case for the event grid. I'm not sure if you missed that part, Pablo. And honestly, yeah, you can actually combine both of these. Let me explain to you what I mean by this. So you can see, I'm going to go to my event hub. There's the event hub. The event hub has got events, right? So I can go to my event hub and I can say, whenever a capture file has been created, for example, right? But you can also see, if I go to the event subscription here, right at the bottom, endpoint type, you can see I can also get the event grid to not send information to my REST endpoint, but to send information to an event hub. So we can aggregate all of these events in the event hub if we want. So yeah, absolutely. At a high level, how could this be used with AI agents pattern-wise? Well, that's a very, very open-ended question there, Jay, I think. I mean, with agents, you're having a conversation, right? So maybe you've got a scenario where in your conversation you say, I want a bank balance. And the agent then has to go off and, get a bank balance. And eventually when it's retrieved the bank balance, maybe it can be an event grid that is essentially sending the back saying, we've got the bank balance now, and you can read the bank balance, for example, right? But it's a it's a very open-ended question. How can we use two vastly different services with AI agents, right? There's no integration from AI agent into this by default. You'll have to build that, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure what exactly you mean by this, but my question would be, what are you trying to achieve with agents with these two services, right? That's that's because without that information, it's difficult for me to understand. What are you doing with agents? Are you having conversational agents, or you are using systems to interact with the large language models? It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, yeah, but always be careful of that. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So yeah, horses for courses. Yeah, we're talking about responding to events, and if those events were triggered by AI agents or by a chat conversation with an agent, that's completely separate conversation. Okay, but no, it's a nice question. You are more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have want to drill down a little bit further into that. I'm happy to be doing that. But it does look like we've reached the end of the questions here. I've got about 8 minutes that I can give back to you if you want to have them. We'll stick around maybe for a few minutes and see if there's some additional questions.
Thank you, Johan. I think we don't have any more questions. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone. Thank you all for joining our session today. Thank you, Johan, for the content. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find the link on the screen or in the chat. We'll see you on the next one.